What did they do? Cap 28. Well, they masturbate. They must masturbate. I don't understand what they could possibly do other than that in COP 28. Do you? Do you know? Do you know? Look at these two very handsome men. Do you notice something? One's wearing a tie and the other isn't wearing a tie. Can you tell which one? I can't. This is NEWSPASTY. My name is Johnny Vedmore, and we're in the houses of Pastyism and down at the Channel 4 Pasty studio. Oh my god, look at it. It looks so cool. It looks like an intelligence agency. Why have they made their studio look like an intelligence agency? Well, there's probably a reason. Maybe everything looks like an intelligence agency nowadays. Maybe it all looks like 1984 eventually.
Alex.
Yes, and frankly,
Alex,
the degree of denigration, where do you begin tonight? I mean, Oxfam's.
oh, the degree of denigration. Where do you go tonight? Says Alex Thompson. Alex Thompson. Alex Thompson. He's an interesting one, isn't he? I think he was the one who came up in an article I wrote just the other day on UK Column News called Pablo Miller, the people behind the real James Bond, and he talked about it. I think this is the same one. It'd be very interesting if that's him. Maybe I got the name wrong, but I'm pretty positive it was this guy. Anyway, they're going to talk about the environment out there, how important it is to pledge to protect the environment. COP28, anger has pledged to phase out fossil fuels removed from draft text. Yes, they discovered something. Do you know what the discovery is? You know what the discovery is? It's a lie. No, it's a lie. I'm saying it. I've said it out loud. Oh, fuck. I've gone and shown him what I think. It's a lie. And you must be thinking, he agrees, it's a lie. And I am in turn thinking, what's a lie? Well, I tell you what a lie is. Shall I tell you what the lie is? The lie is very simple. The lie is very simple. They can't get rid of fossil fuels, you idiots. They can try and put pressure on it. They can boost up the prices so they make more money out of it and stuff like that. But the actual ability to get renewable energy from sources like solar and wind and etc. and renewable sources like that is very extremely small amount of energy we get from those technologies, because really, in the grand scheme of things, those technologies are right at the beginning of their technological journey. They're baby technologies, little child technologies. Yes, one of those solar farms, you put them up, it costs loads of money, expends loads of fossil fuels in creating wind turbines and solar panels and etc. And then you put it out there and you pretend you're getting in some energy, but you're not really getting in that much energy, and it costs loads to maintain it. So it actually means you have to drive around more. Okay, right. There's certain points where it's good. I don't like walking down the street where you got cars pumping out black smoke out the back. Don't like that. Don't like that. I like electric vehicles. Now, an electric vehicle is quite small, compact. The technology in batteries is good enough now that you can ride in an electric vehicle to different places, charge them up, and it's quite efficient, yeah? We can all agree that technology has reached a point where it can be utilized efficiently on a mass scale. That's good. But if you want to power grids, if you want to power industry, an increased need for industry, if you want to put in environmentalism into action, technologically speaking, you have to increase the amount of power that's going to the grid, then you have to do it through fossil fuels, because you can't create that sort of power with on that grander scale with solar and wind and etc. It's just not happening. I know you want it to happen. I know these guys want to demonize anybody who tells them the truth, that they're living in loopy land. That they can, yes, you could drive a bike down the road and you can make it electric. Well, that must mean we can power entire cities. No, No, that's not how things work. Yes, it does. That's how it's got to be because it's environment.
Speaking for many NGOs and environmental groups, and indeed many countries around the world, when they say this is unbelievably and unimaginatively bad as a deal.
When you go, he can barely look at the camera when he's saying this. He's either he's not prepared, so it's pretty unprofessional, or he has a trouble talking about it without reading it and remembering it because it's so ever changing. When you remember global warming, you remember that thing called global warming that used to be, and then they rebranded it to climate change. Well, if you look at about 2009 to 2011, you look at the slides. They're on I go through the slides on NEWSPASTE channel and on Johnny Vedmore channel on YouTube. If you look at those slides, they say on the climate change one, shifting gears on climate change, they say, should we rebrand it from climate change? You know, we called it global warming, now it's climate change. Neither of them has worked to create some sort of intensity. Because with the intensity, you need an apparent reason for an intensity. Like, for instance, as anyone who would have watched Oppenheimer recently, would have thought about the fact that they could have created nuclear energy, nuclear fission or fusion or whatever, um, quickly if they had just put their mind to it. But they needed a war to make it so that they would push through that technological barrier and come out the other side and put all of the scientists together in a room to actually do something greater than themselves, not necessarily good, but greater than themselves. Uh, and that urgency has now been manufactured and manipulated with climate change. Because if you go back to the late 60s and early 70s, when people are creating this narrative, creating climate change, creating global warming, Morris Strong and others who were creating it back then and making it into some sort of like workable scare tactic to force people into large institutions where they can control a narrative, push out propaganda, and make countries enact policy and measures due to environmental protocols. If you go back to the late 60s and early 70s, there is lots of evidence that this was all a scare tactic because partly because back then they were saying, you know, in the 90s we'll all be underwater. And when it got to the 80s, it was like in the new millennium we'll all be underwater. And when we got to the 90s, it said, oh, in like 2020, we'll all be underwater. And when we got to 2000, it said, oh, 2040, we'll all be. And do you see how it works? Do you see how it works? I've watched this carefully over time. At first, I thought, oh, we're all going to die. I used to play Civilization, and at the end, everybody would sink, and you go, oh, there you go. That's it, because suddenly the water levels rise because there's so much water because the ice melts, but it's getting hotter at the same time. So doesn't that mean water's rising? And I don't understand how it works. Well, couldn't we just do something with that water or something? You know, couldn't we do something? Oh no, you're all dead. We're all going to drown. Essex was in one report that I remember reading when I was a kid. Essex by now doesn't exist, and Essex is doing just fine. It's just doing just fine. It's not about to go underwater. And all of that was bullshit. There's been anomalies, but all of that was bullshit. Yes, there is maybe slight sea level rise. And as it gets colder, which that's why that's why they had to rebrand it from global warming to climate change, because it's actually getting cooler. As it gets colder, things will ice up and people will say, there's too much ice and not enough water. Oh my God, we need to warm up the planet. And it's like this thing where we need to be in control all of the time. We need to be in control. And it's no longer in reality. These people are no longer based in reality. So they're all shocked. They're all shocked and disturbed because what they're doing is entering into a closer version of reality all of a sudden from some, a juxtaposed sub-reality, which suddenly a schism because the data can no longer be hidden, co-opted, morphed to be whatever they want it to be. That it means they have to bring it down a notch, and they have to say, okay, we've pushed too fast, haven't we? We pushed too fast, and we're not all going to die. But while the governments and stuff will have to do that, once business will have to do that, these guys who are still within the rhetoric and have made their whole lives about fighting for environmentalism, these guys are all lost now. They're all in shock. They're like, why is everybody doing this? Don't they know all of the fear that we've pumped into people is going to happen?
Al Gore, environmental complainer, saying this is
Ah!
like something that has been written by, for, and with the petro state.
Sorry to stop it again, but he said, Al Gore, environmental campaigner. I heard environmental complainer.
There are two crumbs of comfort. There is a lot in here about accelerating the move upwards in terms of renewable energy. And for the first time, at least
What does
oil
that
and gas
mean?
are on the agenda. It's taken 28 years to get that elephant in the room actually talked about. But as you say, they have removed from the earlier text this, what is deemed a scientific imperative to begin the orderly phase out of oil and gas. And that is being deemed as simply unacceptable.
So I'm confused. They put in some things to talk about oil and gas, but they refuse to remove oil and gas. Let's go back.
But as you say, they have removed from the earlier text this, what is deemed a
bit
scientific
further.
imperative.
Sorry.
Energy, and for the first time, at least oil and gas are on the agenda. It's taken 28 years to get that elephant in the room actually talked about. But as you say,
So they're talking about it
from the earlier text this, what is deemed a scientific imperative to begin the orderly phase out of oil and gas.
That is amazing. So they're saying that they hadn't talked about it before, but he's then within the next sentence explaining that they had written it in before they'd even discussed it, talked about it, before they had decided. They'd written it into the text originally that you have to phase out oil and gas, eventual fade out, without doing any research on whether that can be done. This is where like the want to put forward an agenda overtakes reality by a long way. It's happened here.
And that is being deemed as simply unacceptable. The EU indeed saying tonight they could be actually inclined to walk away from this draft unless it's radically improved.
So what now?
Yeah, what now? Well, around 24 hours. I mean, the gavel's supposed to come down at 7 a.m. UK time tomorrow. That's looking a little unlikely given the huge divisions this has been caused. The absolute test for that man at the centre of it, Sultan Al Jaber, boss of an oil company, but somehow also in charge of climate talks.
Well, there you go. The boss of an oil company. Sorry, that's hilarious. In charge of climate talks. Well, and then the climate talks end in them saying, we'll not get rid of oil, actually. We'll keep oil. That sounds like corruption, doesn't it? Why would they place him there? They know he's the head of an oil company. Why would they place him there? Why would they put him there? Unless to be the excuse to undermine the entire situation. Because that's what they've done here, haven't they? Oh, look, we need someone to blame. And that easy person who we should never have installed in the first place is the easy person to blame. But at the same time, we're all going to use oil and gas loads and fossil fuels, and we don't care about that because we have to. And we need a scapegoat. But lucky we installed this guy who's the perfect already set up for a scapegoat for the thing we knew was going to happen. Do you see how the manufacturing is? They manufacture this stuff. This is all created. This is all theatre. This guy here, Alex Thompson, is a theatrical performer. He's very good at it.
That's a stroke of genius, and he can pull something out of the hat and get those references back in to phasing out in an orderly fashion oil and gas. Or he can't, in which case all the critics will say, well, that's no surprise, we told you so. We will hear something probably tomorrow, but don't forget
So they're expecting the guy who owns the oil company to do something against oil in the last moment. What type of world are these guys in? They're just like, it doesn't make any sense. This gaff studio as well in the background. Oh man, they must be feel a bit uncomfortable working there.
Cops have a habit of overrunning. If ever the stage was set to overrun, surely this profound division tonight is
Overrun.
one.
Thanks, Alex. Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to the Green Party MP, Caroline Lucas,
Oh,
and asked for her.
what? Right, so they're like, we need to talk about environmentalism. Who do we do? Oh, we get this shill in. Oh, what Caroline? I used to be like, oh, Caroline Lucas is wonderful because she's a Green MP and blah de blah de blah. And she does this, but she doesn't. They don't do anything. They don't do anything. When she has to repeat the Build Back Better lines, she's repeating the Build Back Better lines. She's no different than every other one of them. It's really disappointing. It was disappointing for me. I've been through an arc. I've been through an arc. I've been through a emotional arc. I started off with, oh well, I love her. She's great, and I've ended up in, oh my god, that was so disappointing. She just showed me exactly what the rest of the world is like all of the time, over and over. She hasn't even done any research, and she lives within the system, so it's not a surprise. No one is different within the system, it seems.
Thoughts on the COP presidency's claim that this new draft text, in which phased out has been phased out, is a huge step forward?
I mean, that is just unbelievable. This is not a step forward. This is a huge step backwards. You know, you cannot say that you're serious about climate science and at the same time not have a text that talks.
There you go. Serious about climate science. What does that mean? So, let's replace climate with something. Economic science? I'm not sure we'd use science in any other term apart from in this or in any with any other within any other terminology in this meaning. I don't think we would. Climate science is already, you have to believe in the science. That feeling is that is a modern thing, it seems to us, but it's not. It's not. You go back to the 1800s, and there's people in different scientific arenas who are saying you got to believe the science. You got to believe the science, and at the same time they're testing things that are going to kill people on the people. They're telling that you got to believe the science, because these guys, they create their own science, and then they're like, okay, this is cult worship of the science we've created. Now, most of their climate modeling is wrong. So she's already saying, you can't, it's amazing. Climate science. I think it's double speak. Let's listen to it again.
Step forward.
I mean, that is just unbelievable. This is not a step forward. This is a huge step backwards. You know, you cannot say that you're serious about climate science and at the same time not have a text that talks about.
When you just say, I'm serious about the climate, I'm serious about politics, I'm serious about the economy, I'm serious about whatever, why would you have to include science afterwards unless you're automatically having to project out that it's not based on science, that it's based on something else? I think that's why it's there. That's why she has to use it, because it's not based on science. It's manipulated to look like it is. Oh yeah, it has a gleam of science, some sort of scientific understanding, but it has to change all of the time. They have to keep changing it because it's not realistic. They were telling us, oh, we'd be able to get off this by investing in these technologies, but what everybody knew, we were saying behind the scenes and out loud as well, I've heard them saying, no, you won't be able to create that amount of energy, not energy to like run whole cities and stuff. And the more technology we create, we are becoming more technological, not less technological. We are using more power, not less power. So you say, okay, let's be simple maths. You've got to get down to using a tenth of the power you currently use now while increasing the amount of technology 100-fold. There is no way that any of this can be in the real world. So what they say is, if you don't do that, you'll all drown. You won't be able to breathe. Your kids will be barren, won't have children, and you'll get diseases all the time. Okay, the ones who don't believe them get called names. All the ones who are scared by that will then try and go along with a science, a pseudoscience that is not true. And this has happened before in different areas where they push forward a pseudoscience based on a fear that's given because it's one of a Hegelian choice, really. A Hegelian dialectic is one or the other.
Phasing out fossil fuels. You can't say you're serious about the Paris Agreement and everything that's been agreed before if at the same time you're offering people basically a pick and mix. It's an optional menu. People can just pick what they like from it. This is really, really serious, and it's not.
It's not serious because before it was you are forced to do all of this. Now it's you pick and mix. She's actually saying she's actually against the like certain freedoms here. You can no longer choose. You have to go by this and have to go by that. And that is the problem with all of this. All of this is that if you were going to sway entire policy for everything, and focus to lean towards this one area which has been manipulated and gerrymandered so much, and you're going to force people to use it. You live in a dictatorship. You live in a dictatorship, Caroline. You live in a dictatorship. You are a dictator. What you're saying, the words you're saying now, is that of a dictatorship. It's an authoritarian dictatorship. We wrote these rules down in a room, and they're fairly like esoteric. You have to believe in their science for it, and now everybody has got to go by this within this democracy. You don't have a choice. That stinks. It reeks. Listen to it. The things that had to be
backwards. You cannot say that you're serious about climate science and at the same time not have a text that talks about phasing out fossil fuels. You can't say you're serious about the Paris Agreement and everything that's been agreed before if at the same time you're offering people basically a pick and mix. It's an optional menu. People can just pick what they like from it. This is...
No, you have to do it Caroline Lucas's way. You have to do it Caroline Lucas's way. You have to go forward into a new Reich. Yes, you see where I'm going with that? You see, the choice to have the pick and mix is what's called a democracy. They've created a fake fear, and they have to do things now to you to make you believe that is true. They have to pollute. They have to do all of this sort of stuff. The route she's going means the world will become more polluted, and the people who are in control of environmental policy will increasingly be the people who are trying to kill the world. That is the route she's going. That's where she's leading you. Don't go there. See through it.
Really, really serious. And it's not surprising that some of the most climate vulnerable countries are saying that this text represents a death sentence for them.
I mean, I suppose what supporters of it would say is that, look, any mention of fossil fuels in a COP text is progress, because we haven't seen that before.
Well, that's true, but we also haven't seen before the kind of catastrophic weather events, the amount of global heating that is already happening. And we know that there is such pressure now on the next 24 hours.
Wait a minute.
Before the kind of catastrophic weather events, the amount...
We haven't seen before the catastrophic weather events. Yet Caroline Lucas herself and others have blamed every single catastrophic weather event on this. So now she's saying that none of those actually happened, is she saying? Now, or is it just more pronounced? We haven't seen all of this. We haven't seen all of that. We haven't seen all of this. We haven't seen all of that. This is the first time we're seeing it. So this is why it's different this time. That's the same rhetoric they used in the late 60s, early 70s. Same rhetoric they used in the late 70s, early 80s. Same rhetoric they used in the late 80s, early 90s. Same rhetoric, etc., etc., etc. And you get to hear now, and what's changed? What's actually happened? What's actually happened? Is Essex underwater? No, unfortunately not.
Of global heating that is already happening. And we know that there is such pressure now
I
on the
don't mean
next
it.
24 hours to make sure that we
Next
improve
24
on
hours.
this text, because if we don't, it won't be rhetorical to say that this text is a death sentence. Simply mentioning fossil fuel.
There you go. Fear. Death. It's a death sentence. It's a death sentence. How? How is it a death sentence, Caroline? Explain to it. Oh, because everybody will die in the future. Loads of people will die. They'll all go starving because oil guy back here said you have to use more oil and stuff like that because you can't actually summon up enough energy for that. No, but it's a death sentence. It sounds like a fake to me.
Without making it a legal requirement to phase them out doesn't take us further forward. That is a total betrayal of some of the most vulnerable countries in the world.
I mean, the suspicion throughout.
And the vulnerable countries, it's always this way, isn't it? Oh, we won't see it. No, it'd be the vulnerable countries that get it. Oh, really? The vulnerable countries. Do you know why? Because the vulnerable countries have catastrophes all the time that they can't deal with. They haven't built infrastructures like dams and etc. to control the flow of water so that when you have a rise in the water table, there isn't grand flooding like you have in maybe Bangladesh or somewhere else where the infrastructure isn't there. So every time then a weather event happens, which in this country would be really terrible if we didn't have the infrastructure, we have the infrastructure, happens there, they can blame that on climate change. But it's only in 20 years' time they'll say, but we haven't seen the events that we're seeing today, and etc. etc. It's all a big circle jerk of nonsense. I do believe that humans have an effect on loads of different things. We poison water supplies. What a stupid thing to do. Poisoning water. We make water really dirty all of the time. And we got to stop doing that. We got to stop allowing companies to poison the veins of the land. We pollute smog into the air, and cities are well renowned for it. But it's getting better, isn't it? It's getting better than it was before, and it'll keep getting better. And the ozone layer ain't disappearing anymore. Whether it was in the first place, I just don't know because I can't trust the statistics anyway. The fact is that this fear that she's pushing has to be to vulnerable countries that we're not at if we want to believe it. And then we've got to think about this. Do we give a shit? Because have you seen what people in a democracy make a decision about other countries? It's like, we do, that's their country. They got to sort out their shit themselves. That's what they always say. So it's not like anybody would agree. You have to be authoritarian to get to where Caroline Lucas is. You have to force this agenda on people. You have to pretend things are happening. That you have to pretend that everybody's going to die. You have to put the fear of God inside people.
This COP has been that the Gulf states have had an extraordinary amount of influence over the precise text. Now, given this is a global conference, how does that happen?
Well, it happens because there aren't enough rules to regulate, for example.
Oh, listen to this. I mean, see through it. It happens because there aren't enough rules. I'm a Green MP. I care about freedom and clean air and all of this thing. There are not enough rules, and we need a fifth Reich. Now I need a fifth Reich. Oh my God.
The size of the different delegations, the fact that we've had 2,500 delegates here representing the fossil fuel industry, that is more than
of course.
the 10 most climate vulnerable countries put together. So when you...
Yeah, because there's an attack on all of that industry and they're fighting back. Of course that's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. And where do you think they're going to go? Where do you think the oil industry and the fossil fuel industry are going to put their resources in if they go into this one event and lobbying at it stops their industry from going under and watching the world go into collapse because we can't fuel the world and we end up with a war against another country who has continued fuel? Because this is something that you don't understand. Okay, so if the dynamic between Russia and the West, or say Russia and China and the West, was real, imagine that the America and Europe, including Britain, were going to end up in a war against China and Russia. Yeah, and all of the countries around there, maybe even India, maybe even India is involved. It's communist. It's they've all gone back to communism. You know, we're in this world. So what are we going to do? We're going to reduce the fossil fuels, and by that point, we've reduced it. So we're on electric, we're all peaceful society. But they could maybe stockpile and build up classic weapons and boom, 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 destroy everything. Destroy everything really easily. We don't have an infrastructure. We don't have the plants to be able to go and produce at a wartime level. So there's massive reasons why you wouldn't want this to happen, because historically it always ends in factional fighting and wars. So if you get to that stage and you can't produce the weapons to defend yourself, you're going to die, Caroline. You're going to die very quickly, and all based upon a load of lies. And not everything, like I say, not everything is a lie when it comes to environmentalism. Just a fucking load of it.
You have such an inequality of arms, if you like, when it comes to these negotiations. Perhaps
Here we
it's not
go.
so surprising that what you see is an outcome that favours the petro-states and the fossil fuel companies, not some of the poorest countries. So we need the
There you go
US,
again.
the EU,
The poorest
and the
countries.
UK to start really banging heads together, pushing ahead on this. And the tragedy is, of course, that the UK has actually lost a lot of its moral authority, because it right now is pushing ahead with more licenses, 100 new licenses for oil and gas in the North Sea, a new coal mine in Cumbria.
Of course, because you're not living in the real world and you made up a fake pretend world, and it allows you to have a constant conflict and look like the antithesis of the people who's in power. It's a created Hegelian dialectic, isn't it? It's created. She's there going, oh, we need all of this, and look at what they're doing. And they're doing the things that are going to be done because that's the next step that you need to create the energy for the amount of consumption. And they have to keep letting out these stuff. And of course, it gets out of control at some point, especially the more they push on their industries, the more they push them out of other places, and they have to go further afield is an oil field joke in there, to find their fossil fuels. These guys push them into those situations, don't they? They push them into this. This is man-made rise in oil production, caused by people like Lucas putting pressure in one area and seeing it pop up on the other side, because you don't have the money. So you're just saying, oh, scream, stop. Okay, we'll stop over here and we'll go over here. Oh, scream and stop again. Blah, 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 blah.
And the Rosebank oil field. So it's a great disappointment that the UK can't even play the role that we need it to right now, to put pressure on the other states to come out with a better outcome.
Yeah, the role of the
This is the only
Führer.
process the world has. I mean, if you're really saying this is taking
It's the only process the world has. I think he's talking about the COP28, and he means it's the only process the world has for environmental policies. But he just said, he just, I mean, that very big,
the UK
big broad
can't
statement
even play
then.
the role that we need it to right now, to put pressure on the other states to come out with a better outcome.
it is the only process the world has. I mean, if you're really
The only
saying this
process.
is taking us backwards, what's the point?
What's the point?
Because it's the only game in town, Krishnan, that's the point. And
Oh, it's the only game in town, and you keep doing it because then, if you have the only game in town, and it's corruptible and controllable,
many of the poorest countries would say this is the one forum where their voices can be heard loud and clear. Now, listen, it's not the
That's because big countries go and lobby through the smaller countries so they can say, and they convince them. They're like, oh, you're drowning because of climate change. When in actual fact, they're drowning because they haven't got the infrastructure built, because they're having all of their bits stolen off them by Western powers.
end yet, and COP meetings famously, as you know, run late. So there is still time to turn this around. But what people need to know
Try and make
in
a
Dubai
hero.
is that
Oh.
that the eyes of the world are on them, the pressure is on them, civil society is really active there, business is really active there. There are so many people willing a better outcome, and we need them basically to stay in that venue till they come up with it.
Caroline Lucas, thank you very much.
Yeah, Caroline Lucas. Thank you very much for being a champion of the people, being out there. Oh, you're such a hero, aren't you, Lucas? Honestly, I used to think the sun shone out of her butt. It turned out it was just global warming. Oh, wow. I suppose that was a news pasty, was it?
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed